to the Solitary Practice Podcast. I make notes to myself through the week of ideas for different things that maybe I might want to think about talking about, because quite frankly, so much happens that in 2 days I may not remember what it is that I thought of. I'm in the habit, I have notes and lists everywhere. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that before, and I have a list here. I had thought about talking about names today, but it has been a very interesting week. So what I think I'm going to do is hit on the names subject really briefly for just a couple minutes, and then I'm going to take you on the winding trip that has been this week. Weird stuff happens here all the time. Let's just start with names, and we'll see where we'll end up. So anyway, names matter. I'm pretty sure we can all agree that names matter. But names don't necessarily matter in the way I think most people expect them to. Just because you call something a name, that doesn't mean that that's what it actually is. I think people think if they name something and identify it, that that's what it is. It is not what it is. A name doesn't tell you what something is. It tells everyone else what you think it is. A name is just a categorization method to help you place something relative to yourself. For instance, I've got a lot of names. Some of them have to do with tradition. Some of them are in relation to how people perceive me. Some are based in familiarity, affectionate or otherwise. But none of them are actually my actual name. They identify facets of what I am or what people perceive me to be, but they don't actually name me. At this point, I'm not even sure if I have a name. How and what you name things generally indicates where they are in your own personal hierarchy or your own reality. It tells other people where they belong in your reality. And more importantly, they tell you yourself where something belongs. Where something ranks for you is not where it ranks for everyone else. It's where you think it should rank. And it may align, but it also may not align with where everybody else perceives it. Another thing to keep in mind is that names change, just like you or I do. Names that I had when I was younger no longer apply or have changed over the years. I've accumulated some new ones, and often no one really remembers the old ones, sometimes even me. I have a few names that I know, but everybody who knew them is now dead. So no one would actually even know them once I die. That whole thing is gone. There's no record of them. But they were my name at the time, and they were probably pretty correct at the time. They just no longer apply. Another thing to keep in mind is a name also doesn't have to be a name. It could be a title, a word that performs as a name. I've seen that before. Those are just different forms of names, but maybe less formalized. They're not what would generally be considered a name, but they are a name. Just trying to think for a good example of names being an issue. And there was somebody asking whether they should use their birth name or their current name when they tried using numerology on their own name. And that struck me as an interesting question, because you could make an argument for either option, really. They're equally valid. I could argue it one way, I could argue it the other way. Quite frankly, I've spent several months doing that just for fun. My idea of entertainment's a little strange. The real question isn't which name should be used, but which name is their name. And the only one that can answer that is the person who posted. The legions of random internet people are hardly the best ones to judge the correct answer. Usually the only one who can answer those things are yourself. I find that a lot of people, they kind of already know the answer. They just don't like the answer, so they go to the internet hoping somebody's going to tell them different. That, again, is, something somebody's going to have to work through at some point. You have to kind of face the music. If you know the answer, you know the answer. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not the answer. But anyway, since we've established I've got a lot of names, I suppose it's only logical to talk about kind of how I choose which one to use at any given time. That choice usually isn't in regards to my own personal preferences. I think I might probably still have some personal preferences, but I've gotten kind of used to completely disregarding anything that might be my personal preference. I don't get preferences. I get to do work. So the name I give in any situation depends on the situation, the relationship, the impression I'm going for. People generally are not super perceptive about names right away. They'll accept whatever one you give them. And so it's easy to use the name you give to kind of influence the situation and set the stage for any magical work I might be doing later. Pro tip, always anticipate having to do some magical work later. It's better to have the groundwork laid, and it'll lighten your workload later when something comes up and you do need to act. If you don't, well, no harm, no foul, but at least you're set up if you do need to. So very conscious of the names that I choose to use. I tend to think about it quite a lot. I'm also conscious of when I choose not to use a name, because there's that to take into consideration as well. But anyway, I guess my general point is people tend to try to name things because that's what they think it is, and it's a kind of a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, because what you call something is not what it is, it's what you perceive it to be. And I'm not going to beat that poor dead horse any further. So let's hop over into the last week. And as much as the previous few weeks were quiet, the last week has definitely shown some picking up. And I can't say that that is a surprise to me. It is January. We're coming right into the middle part of January. Here we always have what we call the January thaw. And it's usually a period of 3 to 5 days in which we are above freezing consistently. It usually happens that, it's been very cold and everybody's been very housebound. Nobody gets out. There are no social functions. We don't have social functions up here to begin with, really, but nobody's traveling, nobody's doing anything. The weather's been bad. Everybody's holed up, and they call it cabin fever. I don't know if that is generally across the country or if it's just like a local term, but they call it cabin fever. So around this time, the land will kind of, because it warms up suddenly, snow starts melting, the sun is, the angle is different and all of that. And it's kind of like a false spring. And we all know it's a false spring. But the land will start to kind of perk up, and people tend to do some pretty stupid stuff. We have, in the last week, had a shindig on the north end of town. It's a questionable family. I don't know what to tell you. They're spicy normally and sober rarely, so I can't say as I'm entirely surprised. But it did make for a lot of excitement. We saw the police in town. That's not a thing that happens very often. So we had that. We had one person fall down and dislocate their shoulder. I love the information system. Anybody who has long-standing projects knows that every now and then, as good as they are, they will still give you hiccups. And this thing hiccuped so hard this week. Someone I know in town, an elderly person, fell down and dislocated their shoulder on the ice. And of course, the information system is feeding this to me by causing another elderly person, not too far away, to reach out and tell me the news, which is fine. But I'm getting the news. I know that the person fell and dislocated their shoulder. But the where is still confusing to me. I'm going to have to go and question this poor elderly person a little bit harder, because I can't tell which house the dislocation happened at. I don't really know that it matters, but, morbid curiosity, I suppose. And then from there, the nurse that lives in town that's retired went up, and there was a whole emergency. We got a lot of this stuff going on. But again, they've been holed up indoors, and now they're outside, and of course it's thawing. It refreezes at night. Everything is like a glass bottle. So we've got elderly people just falling down everywhere. We've had a couple more deaths. This great scandal in town about who's going to be a pallbearer. I don't really care, but for some reason, somebody thinks I need the list. Let that be a cautionary tale. You make somebody a pie one time, and the next thing you know, you're getting a list of their pallbearers. It's just interesting. So on top of all of this relative insanity of letting the people out of their houses to wander around in the sunshine, which I don't begrudge them sunshine, but I would just wish they'd stay upright and stop breaking things. In the middle of that, I was offered a job, or I guess, magical mission. This thing I've started to jokingly refer to it as the magical mission. And so I was to work in tandem with another person. I don't normally work with other practitioners. It's kind of an odd thing. And this person and I is very differently. I don't know, nothing aligns. It's very disjointed and abrasive. You can get it done, but I just really didn't like her methodology. And there can be something to say with the fact that I do not generally work with female practitioners a whole lot. So yeah, we set off. We're working on this project, and this particular being, I've come across two or three others, not a lot, two or three others, and they would consider themselves traditional. I'm going to say that they're formal. There are prescribed ways in which they work. And if you're looking to get them to do something, you kind of have to use their habits, traditions, whatever you want to call it, kind of get things maneuvered around to where you want them. You cannot bowl in a china shop one of these. They are vicious. I want to say deadly, but vicious is probably the kinder term. Again, you just cannot like bully your way into. They don't. Honestly, they look at that like these are toddlers kicking their shins, and then they annihilate you. So that is the wrong way to go. But unfortunately, this particular practitioner seemed to think that they were a practitioner and therefore they were an authority. Respect is not something that you just naturally get out there. These beings and entities, they know all about, I'm going to say, physical plane practitioners. Let's just say they don't really generate a lot of respect in the higher beings because it's, again, like watching infants roll around and try to figure out how to walk. If said infant walks up to you and tells you, now you're going to do it my way, they're going to laugh or, annihilate you. Anyway, long story short, this particular practitioner will not be continuing this work because the bull in the china shop approach did not really work. Now, should I have intervened and kind of not let this person learn a very important lesson? Maybe. I think about it sometimes, but ultimately no. I got a job to do, and more important than saving their butt or teaching them a lesson is getting the job done. Quite frankly, if this person was as wise and capable and just generally smart and adept practitioner as they said they were, they shouldn't have had any problem seeing what was coming down the road. I mean, obviously the signs were right there. All you had to do was just kind of like look, like read the room, people. Look at the situation. But unfortunately, that wasn't happening because we were pretty cocksure of ourselves, and long story short, well, I don't think we'll be seeing her around again. Now I have to finish the job. And one of the things I did immediately was whack the pause button on this thing. And that's not literal. It's not literally paused. I basically strategically recessed the negotiations to allow time to reconvene at a later date and come at this from probably a different angle. One thing, I wanted to relook at all the angles. I also want time to kind of reevaluate my strategy because I've gone from 2 to 1 negotiating table. And now this thing's kind of offended and they're touchy to begin with. So I really need to come back in with a more refined plan than I currently had. I guess if I have a fault, it is that if somebody is like my little bull in the china shop friend, and they are absolutely determined that we're going to go this way, and if I evaluate that situation and realize that nothing I say is going to change their mind because they're absolutely certain they're correct, I'm just going to let them go. And again, nothing I can tell them is going to change their mind. They're going to want to do it that way because they know, and they're an adept magical practitioner, and of course they've, got 50 years of experience, or I don't know, whatever experience or credentials they want to tout. There's no point in telling them because I am some little backwoods solitary that has no formal training and does the weirdest stuff imaginable because you can't even see it, and they're not going to take my word for anything. So it's just much easier to let them go. And then they get kind of annihilated, and then I'll go in and do cleanup in the end. For me, it's not about which one of us is the better one. It's about getting the job done. Because again, I don't get personal preferences and I don't get to have opinions. I have a job and my job is to go do the job. So anyway, one of the things that really kind of caught my attention is my reaction to watching that whole exchange between the other practitioner and this particular being. It left an impression. I'm not going to say it didn't. It was, clearly nothing I'm ever going to do. just watching that, I can tell you I would never want to do that again. But yeah, so it was an interesting experience. I whacked the pause button. I'm kind of contemplating how I want to proceed, and I don't know that I have an answer yet, but I've been more fascinating with my response to seeing this thing respond to the less than tactful practitioner. I've run across a couple of these beings before. I've always kind of just towed the line and stayed on the fringes when they're around. They tend to mask, so what you're seeing is not what you're getting. They're very adept at blending in, but they have a really distinctive energetic signature. And if you can get past that mask, it's sitting there, and it's basically like a warning sign. I don't even know how to go into it because it's not like I spend a lot of time with them. I don't want to overgeneralize because, again, I've only met a few of them, or seen. I wouldn't even say I've met. I've met one. I've seen a few. So certainly that isn't going to characterize all of them, but they are incredibly, incredibly nonchalant about how vicious they actually are, and there's just such a complete relaxed disregard when they dole out, retribution in some form, that it kind of makes you pause and pay attention. Also raises the hair right in the back of your neck when you watch them do it. They do not break a sweat. They're immensely powerful. They're not something to play with, and they should never be underestimated. But yeah, it was the one that I had met there. I had seen some minor offenses to it and how it responded to those. Just so to see this, that was kind of an experience. And I'm just kind of idly contemplating the best path forward, and ideally, let's just say we're not going to offend that. I'm pretty sure we can go back to I'm going to call it the negotiating table here, and find an agreeable solution to what I'm looking for. But I also kind of wish that I had spent a little bit more time with enough of that particular kind of being to have a better sense of their structure and how they work. Kind of a little concerned that I may put my foot in it with this one, particularly if it's already kind of unhappy. This is not Joe Schmo off the street. I mean, this is clearly a representative that we can have some discussion with. Yeah, not sure exactly where I'm going to end up with that one. So I'd say probably I'm about a third of the way through this particular job, magical mission, project, whatever you want to call it. And I definitely need to kind of get on finishing up. I have been holding off, though, until after the January thaw. I want the land to go back to sleep. It's very... it can sense that I'm kind of... I want to say I'm uncertain. Basically, I have not decided on my path forward, so I'm doing a whole lot of overthinking and underthinking and tearing things apart and relooking. And the land kind of picks up on it when I'm a little agitated. And since it's not fully awake, its solution is to, just kind of like wrap me up. And then I've got to extract myself. So I want to wait till the land fully goes back to sleep, like is well and truly under, so I don't have to worry about that in the middle of it. I'd love to say that, it does it out of the goodness of its heart, but I really think it's a possessive kind of thing, and it isn't going to have its toy taken away, so its decision is, it's going to kind of jerk me down to safety, and I really need to be able to work without something tying my shoelaces together, so to speak. So we'll wait till that goes back to sleep. Once it's fully asleep, then I will go ahead and finish up this particular job. I don't have any doubt that it will work out. I have a couple of, I guess we're going to call them favors that I could call in if I needed to. I don't think I need them just yet. I'm going to kind of hold those on the back burner. But I will say it is always comforting to know that you have like the basic phone a friend kind of thing. Or you have some entities, beings, various whatevers that owe you some assistance. I can't begin to emphasize the importance of banking favors. So many people want things to do for them. What I always tried to do was do things for these other entities, build some goodwill, do some things for them. They don't generally need things from us, but if you're assistive and you kind of go out of your way to make yourself handy, you can build up some goodwill and some credit, I guess, with these other entities, and then it's nice to have that to call it in if you want it. With the lower, and I use that not in a negative way, but with the entities that are I guess I call them lower, but they're more local, small time, not huge and high ranking. For those, if you can collect enough of them who think you're absolutely fantastic, you know, 40 or 50 of those is sometimes worth one high ranking one. It just depends. Again, knowledge is handy, but wisdom to use it is the key. And so I like to have a lot of options and then decide which one is the appropriate one for the situation. And that usually is what is appropriate for the situation, not what I want to do. Because again, personal preference really doesn't have anything to do with what I do most of the time. Once in a while, I have free time and I kind of tinker with things and play and have a good time. But if I'm actually working, my own thoughts, opinions, preferences, they go out the window. The only thing that matters is accomplishing the goal, whatever that is. And, it depends. But I guess I'll stop there for today. I appreciate everybody listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to share it with others. If you've got any questions or a topic you want to hear more about, you can certainly contact me through my website, thesolitarypractice.com. Otherwise, I hope everybody had a great week last week. You have a good week in the upcoming week, and I will talk to you next week.